Howdy, everyone. Welcome to the Leadership in the Dealership podcast, where we strive to share the latest and greatest trends shaping the automotive industry with today's thought leaders. I'm your host, Don Richards-Beff, and I'm excited to introduce our next guest, the one and only estimable Steve Greenfield. How are you, Steve?
Don, it's good to be here again with you.
Yep. Steve, you're in so many places now, from conferences, keynotes, newsletters, just about everywhere. I feel like an intro isn't really needed, but for the three folks in our audience who don't know you yet, can you share the story of Steve, your background, your career, what led you to today and us talking, and being one of really what I consider spokespersons for the pulse of the industry?
No, thank you. You're far too kind. I'll do a short version, but feel free to dig in wherever you'd like.
Sure.
I grew up in Toronto, actually, so I'm here in Atlanta, where you are now, Don. But I grew up in Toronto, and 25 years ago, stumbled into the industry. Started working at an auction, a wholesale B2B vehicle auction up there. Not really understanding the business at all. And within a few months, they had asked me if I would relocate back to the corporate office down here in Atlanta. So that brought me to Atlanta 24 years ago. Worked for that company, Manheim, which was the largest auction company in the world. 9 years in the corporate office, half of that time spent structuring joint ventures overseas. And then 10 years in, had a chance to go work for the CEO of a sister company. At that time, it was a sister company, autotrader.com. Spent 5 years there, a lot of that time overseeing acquisitions of companies like Kelley Blue Book, vAuto, Vin Solutions, HomeNet. And had a good run at Cox, almost 15 years. Great company to work for, as you know. You spent some time there as well. Yep. And then I spent a couple of years. Then I started my own company, raised some money. That didn't work out well in the first iteration. Had to go back to a corporate job, which I ended up working for the same CEO at TrueCar, a publicly traded competitor to AutoTrader. Did 2 years there overseeing strategy and acquisitions. And then most relevantly, maybe for today's conversation, 4 years ago, almost exactly, got back to Atlanta. I decided to change direction pretty dramatically and now find myself a venture capitalist. So we're on fund number 3. We've made 32 investments in 3.5 years. We're focused very early stage across the globe, anything mobility related at the seed or pre-seed stage. And I spend most of my time working with very early stage entrepreneurs, either those that want to take money from us or after we've invested, the 32 entrepreneurs we've invested in, working very hard to try to ensure that they have a good outcome at the end and a good exit.
Hopefully not just take money. Hopefully you're willing to give them money, right? That's the investment thesis in the first place. But you see the logo right behind you for anybody paying attention. Tell us a little bit about Automotive Ventures. I think when you and I have discussed, you just mentioned you're on your third fund. So I'm aware of your dealer fund. You've got a mobility fund, and you have 3 focuses for Auto Ventures. Do you mind covering what those are, where you're focusing your time, your team's time?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I kind of see it as a flywheel, right? So we work a lot on our brand, as you mentioned. So I'll take any opportunity to get up in front of either entrepreneurs and or potential limited partners, which are our investors, our lingo for investors within the VC world. And so we do a lot on the brand. I publish a weekly newsletter that goes out 7 a.m. every Monday morning, trying to encapsulate sort of and summarize the most relevant mobility news for our audience, which is now up to almost 10,000 that subscribe to that every week. And so the brand is very important for us to kind of break through, differentiate, both appealing to potential investments, those entrepreneurs who might raise their hand and be willing to take money from us, but also from an LP standpoint, for those folks that are out there in the ecosystem who could potentially be investors. And really, that's the 2 other areas that you referred to, is that we nurture a pipeline. We see about 50 companies per month and have to drive those through our process, ultimately yielding about one investment every month and a half overall. And then we have LPs on the other side. So we have, this investor base now that's about 120 high net worth individuals and or companies that are investing. And we have to do right by them and be good stewards of their business. And then in the middle of that, once we made these investments, these 32 investments, I serve now on about 7 of those boards. But for any of those entrepreneurs, we do everything within our power to help them raise more money, introduce them to strategic partnerships, help them get more customers. We're at their disposal in terms of how much they need us and what they need us for.
Oh, awesome. On the dealer side, so you've done dealer investment in companies that benefit dealers, and this is leadership in the dealership. A couple of the ones I'm familiar with, WarCloud. You've got Recurrent, Privacy for Cars. People may be aware of VinQ. Are you still going strong in the dealership investment thesis? You mentioned mobility. What's your take on dealership investment?
Yeah, so we have 2 fund families. Fund number 1 and fund number 3 are both mobility related. Fund number 2, as you mentioned, we called the dealer fund. We went out, we raised a $13 million fund from dealer principals, investing in solutions that benefit car dealers. So as you said, we've made investments in companies such as WarCloud and VinQ and Recurrent. But we're trying to really figure out, well, you have to sort of keep in your mind a thesis around what the next 5 or 10 years are going to look like. Yep. And at the same time, find companies that are going to uniquely alleviate some of the challenges and or exploit opportunities you think that are going to manifest within that 5 or 10 year time frame. The litmus test is this solution going to help a dealership either drive more revenue or take costs out of their business? And if we can find, ideally, you find a solution like WarCloud, which is rare, that does both at the same time. But, we are looking for solutions that are going to help dealers over the next 5 or 10 years, effectively, run their operations more efficiently. And like I said, that could be, adding incremental revenue and or taking out costs.
Pretty solid career. Again, you're running keynotes everywhere, but I think you're being maybe, I don't know, a little soft on what you've accomplished, because I think you actually launched someone's career almost. A car dealership guy, you did his first podcast, I believe. So some might say you launched a media empire. So,
well, he might differ, but yeah.
Yeah, of course. I don't know that Yossi would agree, but when you look back at it, you were number one. So he's obviously got a few under his belt at this point. Now, one of the things people may know you for, and certainly if you go back and you look at some of the podcasts you've done and kind of viewpoints that you've put out there, if there was anyone I was going to ask about the state of EVs, and certainly where you're thinking about your investment in mobility, it would be you. EVs a year ago, I think everybody had a perspective of where they were going. Tesla's setting records. You fast forward a year, which is, I think, as we all know right now, a long time in the auto industry. Mm-hmm. Things are a lot different, right? We have Musk with a $56 billion pay package that'll probably be approved today. Rivian just did a full-on model refresh, trying to knock cost out of their business and become profitable. Where do you see EVs halfway through 2024? You talk about that 5 to 10 year horizon. Where do you see them going, where we are right now, and then where we might be 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And, I have a lot of empathy for the legacy automakers who are sort of stuck in this sort of, we want to be more environmentally friendly. We understand that the Biden administration came in very aggressive with top-down stimulus to help sort of like spark interest in EVs and stimulate demand for EVs. And it's been really, really hard for the automakers to anticipate what demand might be. And we're seeing that play out in real time, right? So, and, automakers, as you know, Don, have to plan, 3 to 5 years ahead. They're retooling factories, their product plan is locked in 3 years hence, right? So it's really hard to then be able to pivot as consumer demand changes in real time. There were false positives, I think, from Tesla. What was really scratching an itch for a luxury EV, and there was a segment of consumers, largely in California, but a segment of consumers that really were demanding that. And also at the same time, because they've collapsed and vertically integrated their supply chain, their operating margins were considerably higher than the legacy automakers. Those have come down to earth largely because they've now got competition from the legacy automakers, and they've had a discount, which has caused a lot of downstream effects as well. So I think it's hard to tell. Like I think that EVs are here to stay. They aren't going to go anywhere. It's going to be a viable drivetrain. We're seeing, at least in the short term, we've seen a lot of acceleration and adoption of hybrids as an interim drivetrain for folks, whether it's plug-in hybrids or just the non-plug-in variety. But I think if I go 50 years out, 50 years out, I probably won't be around any longer. You may be, but I won't be. But
let's see how we do. Let's see how we do.
Never know. Our consciousness might be uploaded to like some Elon Musk robot.
I mean, we're AI thesis. I'm waiting on your AI fund next, so we'll see where we go from here.
my singularity fund.
There you go.
I do think that high probability that 50 years from now all cars will be electric, and we'll have figured out one. The supply chain issues, rare earth minerals, et cetera. We'll have figured out how to build them very cost effectively, and the technology will just get better, right? So we won't have anxiety around range, and we won't have anxiety around, is there sufficient charging infrastructure? The cars will get charged effectively through induction, so there won't be such a thing as charging, and they'll just get charged, right, kind of magically. From the consumer's perspective, so the range will be not an issue at all, and it'll be a great substitute. We'll look back at ICE vehicles as being sort of an anachronism, like the rotary phone is today. So, but if that's 50 years out, it's really hard to figure out all the messiness between now and then. You ask 5 years from now, and EVs, the pure battery electric vehicles, there will be a place for them. But I don't suspect that we will get by 2030 to the 50% that many of these analysts and consulting firms predicted because of the short-term, noise that we're feeling. And, battery technology and charging infrastructure are issues and need to get markedly better before we have mainstream adoption.
So it sounds like you're saying you feel strongly that your bet with Scott Case is you're gonna come out on the winning side, and he may not as far as EV adoption by 2030. I think you have a bet on the line. Is that right?
We do. So Scott Case, one of our company's CEOs, Recurrent, he and I have a kind of ongoing bet, and we've debated in public a couple of times the over/under on whether or not we'll get to 50%. Penetration of EVs by 2030, which is only 5 years from now. And I'm taking the under, he's taking the over. But more power to him. The truth is, if he's right, then his company is going to be that much more adopted, and we're going to do really well with that company. We're going to do well in any event. But either way, I win. But I'm taking the under still.
Fair enough. And I don't think any of us would have predicted where we are today, even a year ago. It's pretty wild. So think about, we've got pure plays. We've got Tesla. We've got Rivian, right? Folks thought, I think, Rivian was going to be maybe out the door. Now they're looking like they're nearing profitability. You've got Polestar and others that are pure play. Chinese on the doorstep. But when we think about traditional legacy auto, if you had to place a bet right now on who winners and losers, and again, let's just focus on winners. We won't go down the negative path. Where would you place a bet if you're going to buy an EV next? Who's doing the best given all the challenges that we see right now, and maybe who's the next up and comer?
So is money no object?
I mean, we can go premium or affordability. I think. Let's talk premium, and then maybe who's gonna ship volume, right? Outside of, again, pure play like Tesla.
Yeah. So Porsche's building pretty nice EVs right now, and from a performance standpoint, but not for the mainstream folk. I mean, there are all kinds of really good quality EVs, whether it's Volkswagen or Hyundai, that are really offering reasonable EV value for cost. Costs still need to come down, but we are seeing some glimmer that we're going to have cheaper EVs soon on the market. And I think vis-a-vis what you can buy in a Tesla. I mean, Tesla's very competitive. I mean, there were lease rates that were at $299 recently that I saw on Model 3s. Very, very competitive, and they'll continue to be competitive because, like I said earlier, they've got the margin to be able to play with. But I think that you can get really good quality EVs from many of the legacy brands. I think the interesting one to watch is Stellantis, because they haven't been competitive yet, but they made this 20% investment in a Chinese automaker named Leap Motors, and they're co-opting basically Chinese manufacturing it'll come under a Stellantis brand, but similar to the Polestar and the Volvos being Chinese-made EVs that they're bringing into the U.S. I think that'll be interesting. I think we're gonna see a world of co-opetition with the Chinese, and the legacy automakers are going to realize that the best path is to figure out how do I co-opt some of these Chinese brands that are aspiring to get into the U.S. and can't because of tariffs, and then maybe using some of that technology in plants that are in the U.S. to bypass some of the tariffs. And I think that's going to be the interesting path forward here, is like how much the legacy automakers actually co-opt Chinese automakers as opposed to thinking about competing with them.
Yeah, so you mentioned price, right? It's always on a lot of folks' mind. Chinese competition, I think we see what appears to be on paper outrageous prices, meaning not on the high end, but on the low end. And how do you compete against that? Well, we have tariffs in place. But I think we just heard about Ford has a secret low-cost EV program that's ongoing right now. We'll see where that ends up. You and I talked previously about BYD. If I had a chip and I was going to place it somewhere, it might be BYD, but they're being blocked out. Do you see co-opetition and cooperation with Chinese manufacturers as the only way to low-cost vehicles, or do you think we figure it out on our own? Again, looking at Tesla as an example, where do we go there?
Yeah, so I think Tesla will continue to be maniacal around driving costs out, right? There are downstream implications. We should talk about that too, in terms of vehicle repairability, because Tesla's now building cars that are effectively, in many ways, not repairable, partially because of this like mega casting or giga casting that they're doing. It brings costs out of the manufacturing process, so the consumer can buy a car cheaper, but the consumer is going to end up paying in higher insurance rates down the road because the cars aren't going to be repairable. And they're going to be high, the threshold for total loss, even with small accidents and collisions, is going to be very much lower. So that's an interesting dynamic, which will ultimately manifest in higher insurance premiums for many of these brands. But yeah, I think that competition's good. Competition's good for the consumer. So I think that the automakers will continue to, the legacy automakers will continue to rip apart Teslas and see what they're doing. They'll be ripping apart the Chinese manufacturers and learning from them as well. I mean, when BYD, to your point, can launch a global car at a price point of around $10,000 US, it's very disruptive. And the legacy automakers, tariffs or non-tariffs, the legacy automakers are going to have to continue to be competitive. Otherwise, they're just going to concede every single international market to the Chinese. So shame on them if they don't stay competitive and learn what they can, as we did in the 70s from Toyota, and ripping apart sort of like their processes. I think now the legacy automakers have to be looking at Tesla and the Chinese as inspiration to see what can we be learning from them to drive costs out of our operations and thus bring cheaper cars to consumers in America.
In some ways, it's kind of out-Teslaing Tesla, right? In their origin story, they were ripping apart other vehicles, trying to understand how they work, and now we would see the same thing again. Let's take these low-cost vehicles, figure out how they're made, and replicate that strategy. So you hit affordability. I was going to save that probably to the end, but let's dig into it now, because I think we're seeing. You mentioned hybrids as one option, right? So for those that feel like range just isn't good enough, the charging infrastructure isn't there, broken chargers, or I don't want to pay for the cost to install a charger at my home, or frankly, just EVs in their initial release cycles being expensive, right? Hybrids, electrified vehicles, if you will, put that small motor in there, let you run around town. Was Toyota, is that a prescient decision of let's go hybrid and forget about EVs, except for the one EV that they do have out there? Were they smart? Were they lucky? What do you think about hybrids and being a bridge to what is really an expensive purchase with EVs?
Yeah, I mean, what do they say? Luck is where opportunity meets preparedness. Definitely, Toyota had the foresight to be investing in this technology decades before others, and or not give up on the technology, maybe more importantly, when others did. I mean, you could say the same thing to your point about BYD. I mean, BYD definitely seems to be the right company at the right place at the right time. in terms of battery technology themselves, and then producing really high quality, low price vehicles for the global markets. How much of this is luck? How much of this is just being determined to kind of shape and form a market? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, Toyota was being sort of vilified not 12, 18 months ago for dragging their feet on, pure
Yep.
BEVs. And at this point, now they're hitting all-time highs in terms of stock market value creation because they seem to have called the ball correctly, right? So they've got hybrids at the exact moment where the U.S. market is demanding hybrids.
When we think about, you mentioned repairability. So I think some of the numbers that are coming out around EVs, whether it's Tesla and gigacasting, and the cost to repair there is you're either repairing at great cost or maybe you're calling it complete loss. We're seeing EVs have higher insurance rates. We're seeing EVs with high repairability, but that's kind of going across the board, right? So insurance rates have increased. I think 20-something%. Repairability is up 10%. It's just getting more expensive to own a vehicle. Where does a consumer go for relief? Like, what's the opportunity in the market right now to find something lower cost?
Yeah, I don't foresee any of this is going to get easier, right? So we had this COVID-fueled sort of shortage, challenges with the supply chain.
Yeah.
Parts were hard to come by, et cetera. But the vehicles are going to continue to become more sophisticated. I was at a conference recently where a gentleman who is running collision repair shops, said, "Look, 10 years ago, repairing a rear bumper on a Toyota Camry was a $500 job. Today, it's a $5,000 job, simply because the amount of electronics that are in the bumper. So the cars are going to become safer because of all these, ADAS fueled sort of like protections, automatic cruise control, lane keeping assist, etc. But that means more cameras, LiDAR, radar that are very costly to repair, even if it's a small fender bender, right? So all of that's going to trickle down to higher insurance costs for cars in general. To your point, I don't know if we're going to see a backlash. Like, are we going to see, the equivalent of like base level cars with crank windows come back? I'm sure
Right.
the
Yeah.
younger people on this podcast don't even know what crank windows are. But you could have a car that's largely decontented, with cloth interiors, very very simplistic interiors that don't have a lot of technology that would be cheaper to maintain and insure as a result. But I don't know if we're ever gonna. I think the genie may be out of the bottle here, and we may be just living with more complex vehicles with more technology, which means that they're going to be much more expensive to repair, which ultimately manifest in much higher insurance premiums for cars overall. And I think that's just the new normal that we're going to be living through.
Yeah, I'm rooting for Ford and their low cost EV strategy then, and hopefully Tesla, maybe they'll go the $25,000 vehicle instead of robo taxis. We'll see. But when we think about self-driving autonomy, people always ask the question, hey, what's your favorite car? What's your dream car? My dream car was one that drove itself, so I didn't have to worry about anything. I used to tell my kids that you're never going to have to learn how to drive. Well, my daughter's driving now and already had her first little small fender bender that cost, thousands of dollars. And it was like, oh my goodness. But when we think about when we think about self-driving, where are we going? Is it going to be a reality, or is it just another hype cycle?
Yeah, there's a slide I like to show when I'm presenting, which shows an unnamed consulting firm back in 2013 that forecasted by this point, 10 years later, 2023, 2024, all new cars would be fully self-driving. And I would maintain that Uber's whole business model was predicated that within a few years, they launched 2012, 2013. You're going to be able to remove the human driver and flip to positive unit economics very very quickly. But here we are, 10 years hence, and we're really no closer. Cruise had huge challenges, obviously, and Waymo, the amount of miles that they're driving is almost a rounding error at this point. So we aren't really any closer to full level 4, level 5 autonomy on roads. Having said that, I think we also have to say that the amount of advancement that we've experienced around these ADAS systems within cars is really remarkable, right? I mean, the cars are getting closer to a point where we should start to see a dramatic drop off in, like, your daughter's fender bender shouldn't have happened, right? If there's automatic braking and such, then even if the driver is either inexperienced and or distracted, the car should be protecting itself from crashing into at least other cars. They should be communicating between each other. So I think we're going to continue to see great advancements there, which is very, very hopeful. But we've seen great strides in full autonomy anywhere there isn't human cargo or human pedestrians that the cars are interacting with. Use cases like farming, where a tractor can be out on the fields 24/7, or mining. There are mines now where Caterpillar is enabling full autonomy for mines where you can be running them 24/7 as well. So, but in terms of full autonomy for vehicles overall, I have a hypothesis that we will see certain countries that go and flip over to full autonomy, where in 10 years you'll travel to these countries and there won't be drivers, because they'll proclaim that it'll be safer, but it'll be in those countries that have heavy influence, top-down influence in making that decision. I would say borderline democracy slash, dictatorships, where they'll be able to just make that binary switch and just say, on this date, we're not going to accept human drivers any longer. But in countries like, America, I just don't see in my lifetime that we're going to have full self-driving in widespread applications on streets, for a multitude of reasons, not the least of which is that consumers just are going to have a hard time wrestling with just the ethical questions around full self-driving.
Sure. So if you're in your mobility funds, am I to take that you would be investing in other autonomy applications, long haul trucking? You mentioned farming, et cetera. Would you be putting your money there as opposed to what we would call, auto consumer mobility, or do you have an investment thesis? I'm putting chips in both right now.
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. It's interesting. Give you some insight into how VCs have to think. So we're raising 10-year funds. I mean, the fund that we're raising right now has a 10-year span, and my investors expect to get their money back plus multiple times of their money back within a 10-year span. So like Dale Pollack from vAuto schooled me on early. I oversaw that acquisition. He said, Steve, being early is worse than being wrong. And I think that that resonates with me as a VC now, because even if we invest in a killer technology, but the market isn't ready for it for 15 years, it doesn't do me any good and doesn't do our investors any good. So I think that to your question, we're really trying to figure out, yes, understanding and anticipating these waves, full autonomy with applications like you said in farming, agriculture, mining, construction, and figuring out which technologies can get adoption within sort of a 5 to 7 year plan, a time frame. So a good example is, we invested in a company recently called Kinetic Automation, and they're using robots to calibrate the ADAS systems on a car. So think about sort of whether your car, your daughter's collision, right? If you damaged any sensors, LiDAR, radar, et cetera, at the end of that collision, those sensors need to get recalibrated back to original OEM spec. Otherwise, automatic cruise control and lane keep assist isn't going to work properly, and you're going to risk the lives of the occupants of that car. So we invested in a company that's automating the calibration of these vehicles, either at the end of collision or more and more automakers now, when even things as trivial as changing your tires and doing a tire alignment, you're going to need to make sure all those cameras and LiDAR sensors are recalibrated to make sure that the car isn't wandering outside of the lane. So I think that we made an investment in that business. I am convinced, and more convinced now than I was pre-investment, that this is a thing. It's a big thing. Every car is going to need to be periodically recalibrated, especially as the sophistication of these ADAS technologies become much more advanced on these vehicles.
So I'm going to go take that decontented vehicle, because just looking at my daughter's accident, it was a small little in the parking lot fender bender, and that was $2,500. And I'm like, really? That's how much it costs now? And I think to your point, that location right on the bumper. You've got sensors and everything else. Whereas, I'm still thinking about 10 years ago when I didn't have to worry about those. So that's that cost of repair. I hope that as the cars get safer, right, we may see repair cost or needs for things like recalibration. Hopefully we'll see insurance costs go down. Maybe we'll see. So as you think about, let's flip it back to dealers and investment thesis there. If we think about a year ago, strategies, or we're hearing things like it's all about who can bring a cohesive experience to the dealership, right? So you think about folks like Techion or large traditional players like CDK, and Cox, right, that we're both familiar with. They have the opportunity to control not just the data that comes in and goes back out, but the whole consumer experience. When you think about where you would invest, if you were launching another dealer fund today, what gets you excited? Is it going up against those guys, or is it let me work on the fringes and find, as you mentioned, efficiencies or ways to tweak profitability for a dealer? Where would you put your bets right now?
It's a great question, and we are actively investing out of the dealer fund. We've only made 8 investments, and our hope is to make 25. So we are hunting solutions, and we've got some interesting ones that we are actively investing in. But yeah, it's a great question. So if you and I go back to our time together, 10 years ago, there was this promise that all transactions would occur online, et cetera. And it just hasn't played out. And for a multitude of reasons, right? There are more pure online transactions, but it's a very small percentage of total transactions overall. And, consumers are making this very large considered purchase with a lot of moving parts and, uncertainty around whether they're going to be able to qualify for financing and whether those incentives will apply to me. And I haven't test driven this vehicle yet. And I might be interested in making a relationship with the dealer at which I plan to service my vehicle, get a sense for, how ethical they are and, what the service bays look like, et cetera. So I think that, consumers, the vast majority of consumers are still acting at the dealership. But having said that, and bringing it back to like investment thesis, there are plenty of opportunities. And the buzz of today is all around AI. And most of the AI promises have been overblown, but we are starting to see interesting companies. Like, for example, I was in Los Angeles earlier this week, and one of the companies that pitched out there, I won't name their name, but fairly early stage, but they're answering every single lead, every single phone call from a dealer in 60 seconds, and they're professing to be able to close the consumer, and that's an appointment, whether it's for service or for sales, at a 10% higher rate than a human in their BDC would be able to do, right? So I think we are on the cusp of practical AI that can either automate processes and take out mundane, repetitive tasks like our company WarCloud that does that for dealers, or on the flip side, actually provide a much better consumer experience, meet the consumer where they want to be met. And, I do think the next generation of consumers aren't necessarily going to want to be on the phone with a human and aren't going to necessarily want to, transact and negotiate with a human. They're going to welcome online experiences, probably via their phone, where they can check off more of the transaction ahead of time and feel confident that when they walk into the dealership, things aren't just going to be reset and they aren't going to have to start from scratch, but, get the credit for doing the work up front. And, I do think Gen Zs, for the most part, aren't going to want to get in and have hardcore negotiations. They're going to want to be able to do most of this work online and get credit for it.
I mean, with as much time as my kids spend on their phones, I tend to believe that they probably spend more time on their phones than actual humans. Now, they would cringe if they heard me say that, but that feels like what it is. So it sounds like we have the return of IVRs. Like what is old is new again. It's just now Gen AI and maybe a little bit smarter. Agree with you. I don't know how I would feel talking to maybe a smart agent on the other side versus a human, but I certainly know online the idea of how can I remove friction, how can I complete a deal online and just walk into a dealership, pick up my keys and walk out. That is the dream, right? I don't think anybody wants to spend 4 hours in the finance office. or listening to, hey, hold on, I need to go grab someone in the BDC, right? They hear us talk about the jargon and they're like, what am I doing here? I just want my car.
Yeah,
So,
right.
so as we think about that online piece, I've been a huge proponent myself, and maybe a little too ahead of the curve, right? I think if we go back 12 years ago, it was like, man, dealers should just communicate with each other and never go to the auction. Might have been a little ahead of the curve, but here we are 12 years later, and it's certainly happening. So on consumer purchases, I think the same thing. I go back to Carvana, going, yeah, that's brilliant. And then they had their troubles. We have CarMax, et cetera. And now we have, you were certainly involved in marketplaces, and we have what we call the rise of the marketplace, effectively. Amazon announcing with Hyundai. You've got every other marketplace looking to basically sell online. So whether consumers are ready or not, much like EVs, where do you think marketplaces are going, and what is the reception from a dealer? Are they going to jump at the opportunity to work with Amazon, who might take business away or might push them? Are they going to jump on Auto Trader, Car Guru's cars? Do you see that as a successful path forward for both the consumer and the dealer?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with, if you rerun the clock 5 years, you went to marketplace conferences, and they were talking about how do these marketplaces become more transaction based, and basically dip their fingers into more of these kind of profit pools. The trade, you saw some marketplaces make huge investments. Actually, every marketplace, I think, has made a huge investment in a trade solution to provide a guaranteed trade price to the consumer, but do it in a way where then they can hand that trade off to a dealer. They've invested in financial monthly payment calculators, and there have been talk about the marketplaces trying to participate. Will provide a menu of F&I products and participate in the economics. I don't know that any of the big marketplaces have been successful yet. That's fraught with its own issues. And
Sure.
F&I still needs to be digitized, et cetera. But I think that the marketplaces will continue to try to figure out how, in a consumer-friendly way, they provide more of the shopping experience up front. To align with our conversation earlier, how do you allow the Gen Z to feel more in control, get credit for doing more of the work up front, but do it in a way that isn't going to be at odds with the dealers being able to maximize their profit per unit. Fast forward to, or take it to Amazon. Yeah, Amazon's interesting, right? So, when I talk to dealers about Amazon, I like to bring up a couple of facts. One is Amazon has close to 200 million Amazon Prime subscribers now, but there are only 135 million households in the US. So we've got more Amazon Prime subscribers, ironically, than we have households in the US. So for all intents and purposes, every one of their shoppers is an Amazon Prime subscriber. Number two is Amazon is an interesting shopping experience now, because they have, as an Amazon Prime subscriber, I've consciously made the decision to give up price discovery for the convenience of getting products quickly and reliably, and having this great, generous, liberal return policy. And what I mean by that is try to go buy any product on Amazon and convince yourself you're getting the lowest price. You can't. I mean, right now they kind of obfuscate the search, and whereas if you remember back to the days of eBay, you could search price low to high.
Sure.
Amazon doesn't give you that option, and they do it on purpose, right? So there's a lot of sponsored advertising now on Amazon, and they don't want you to be able to reset the search criteria to only find the lowest priced goods. So all of us are paying potentially more for the goods and sacrificing price discovery for the convenience of using Amazon. The other stat that I tell dealers now is 2/3 of all product searches originate not on Google any longer, but on Amazon. And I know I self-reference, but when I get on Amazon and I'm looking for a product and they don't have it, I get really frustrated, because it's my go-to source to search and buy very effectively. At 2 in the morning, when I need toilet paper or whatever, I use Amazon, and I use Amazon for everything. Even though I know I could get a lower price if I went in and shopped at Target, I'm fine with that, because I'm willing to pay for the convenience. At 7 a.m. when I wake up, the toilet paper is on my front step. So I think there is this interesting dynamic that we've conditioned a younger audience to concede on price discovery, which means they may not be as sensitive nor focused on negotiation, which is a good dynamic for dealers
Yep.
overall. But given that Amazon now controls every single household's buying activities, and we've got, effectively every household subscribing to Amazon Prime, and 2/3 of all product searches begin on Amazon, we can't dismiss the fact that Amazon, if they're successful, will have a significant portion, could capture a significant portion of new and ultimately used car sales overall, right? So maybe more information than you wanted to hear, but that's how I lay
No.
the foundation with dealers to say, pay attention to this thing, right? So
Yeah.
yes, they will have, they'll stub their toes, and we're hearing just anecdotally this thing's going slower than they had expected. I had heard originally, I believe, that by the end of the year they wanted to have 10 additional OEMs in addition to Hyundai. We haven't heard any of that. I haven't even heard that they've expanded beyond the initial 18 so far, but maybe there's better information out there. But having said that, I would not discount Amazon for all intents and purposes. They have all the audience that's conditioned to use them first to buy products, and they have unlimited resources to throw at this. And the last thing I'll add is, if you look at every single product category, you stack rank them from the largest to smallest advertising categories, it's a suspicious list, because the only product category that Amazon isn't in the top 10 is automotive sales. So it's inevitable that they will continue to prioritize resources to get into this vertical.
Yeah. I feel like it's distribution, like you said, resources, customer experience, right? They're known for customer experience, but I think more than anything, the winner, Amazon, Car Gurus, Cars.com, TrueCar, whatever marketplace, even the big publics, right? Who put time into like Driveway, et cetera. It feels like convenience wins the day more than anything else, right? Is if you can make it easy for Steve's mom, my daughter when she goes to buy her first car, to not have to deal with I think all the craziness that we're used to. I think we just take it for granted. That's how you buy a car. If they just make it easy, almost as easy as placing your Amazon Prime order, whoever does that seems like they win the day. Do you think there's room for multiple solutions here? It's not just like we're going to consolidate in one winner, but that convenience wins across anybody who decides to play in that game?
Yeah. I don't think we're in America. It's a huge market. 18,000 dealers spending 50 grand a month on advertising and 30 grand a month on software. The consumers want choice, the dealers want choice. I think there can be multiple winners, as we've seen play out in other categories. A few winners, the best winners, but I do think it's really hard to envision a future where only one player wins.
So we think about middle of 2024, you go back to your predictions at the beginning of the year. Is kind of one of the things I always look forward to is where is Steve placing his bets? I don't know if you remember them off the top of your head, but if you think about a bet that you were wrong on, or maybe timing is slightly off, what would you say that has been a surprise here at the midpoint of the year?
I can't remember what it was for this year, but just thematically, I think I've done this for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
I said that Carvana would get picked off by Amazon, and I'm actually surprised that didn't happen, especially as you said earlier, in the podcast here, that Carvana's had their ups and downs. They're riding a good positive wave now, but they've had their challenges. And during that, I would have thought that somebody would have, and I'm sure there were those conversations, but a faster path for Amazon to get to market would have been, buy Carvana, put Amazon's brand on it, and really drive a lot of traffic through the Carvana business model. That I think, one of their big costs is that cost of acquisition of consumers. And if that went away and went to zero effectively with a brand like Amazon, man, the unit economics would flip really quickly. So I suspected that to happen. Big players like I expected Reynolds and Reynolds with the passing of Bob Brockman to have already transacted. And I made that call, I think, a couple of years ago and was just really, really wrong. So it's hard to predict these big things in the market overall. But like you said, I'm fairly confident. My bet with Scott Case from Recurrent will win, but I could be wrong. We could have huge breakthroughs in battery technologies, and we get cars with 2,000 miles per charge, and they can charge in 2 minutes. Then all bets are off, right? So you never know with these big, lumpy technology breakthroughs when we're going to see suddenly consumers buying cars online, or massive adoption of battery technology, or whatever it might be.
It takes a lot longer than we think, and then all of a sudden. So, all right, we'll close it out with just quick rapid fire questions. This is, for anybody who hasn't met Steve yet, it's here's some new things that you might not know about Steve. Favorite food?
Pizza.
Pizza. Never can go wrong. Last movie you saw?
I started watching Dune 2 on the plane. I loved the first one, and I only got through like a small snippet, but I love that series.
Yeah, do yourself a favor and put it on the as big a screen as you can, as loud as you can. It's a great movie. Okay. Last book you read?
I'm reading a lot of venture capital books, which would be really boring for your audience. So I downloaded a bunch of them on Audible. And anytime I'm in a rental car, I play them on 2 times speed. So, but it's keeps you focused while you're driving.
Cool. Well, anybody who is listening, pick up Steve's book on Amazon, Future of Automotive Retailing. And then I saw you have another book coming out at the end of this year. So looking forward to that one on mobility. Who are you learning the most? Who are you learning the most from right now?
It's funny. So it's a good question. Like I said earlier, we have the luxury or the benefit of meeting 50 entrepreneurs a month. So a lot of my day is back-to-back Zoom call, 30-minute Zoom calls with entrepreneurs. And what they don't know is they're educating me. Every time I get pitched, whether I agree or disagree with their approach and whether or not they're going to be able to build a differentiated business model, et cetera, the quickest way to learn is be around smart people. And I get the benefit of like literally having 50 of those conversations every month from entrepreneurs who are risking everything to go after and vanquish some big dragon, some really big idea. So I learn the most out of everything, all my interactions, I think, just from the multiple daily interactions I have with like really passionate entrepreneurs.
That's great. And then your next vacation, I know you're going to Hawaii for travel and you've been, overseas and whatnot. Where are you going on your next vacation? Where are we going to see Steve relax?
Nothing planned. I relax on weekends. I have 11 cats in my house. And believe it or not, for whatever reason, I love getting home. I travel a lot, but spending time at home on weekends, catching up on sleep, catching up on whatever I need to do around the house, and spending time with 11 cats. Probably telling the audience more than they want to know, but I actually really love just being home at weekends and chilling out.
No, that's look, when you're moving around as much as you do, you need some downtime. So how can our listeners reach you after seeing this podcast?
Well, the good thing is I'm not hard to find. If you just Google Steve Greenfield, you'll find me. We've done a good job with SEO, but Steve at automotiveventures.com. If you care to if you like this kind of stuff, I do have a weekly email that goes out 7 a.m. Eastern time every Monday morning, like clockwork, and it kind of synthesizes all the, like I say, all the automotive and mobility news that matters over the previous week. Stuff that I'm reading anyway, I try to synthesize for our 10,000 readers. And if you come across an early stage company that you think is interesting, let me know, because we are actively investing.
Cool. We'll try to put a link in the show notes for your newsletter. And Steve, thanks so much for joining me today. I know we're going a bit long here, but amazing conversation as always, and looking forward to catching up with you soon.
Don, it's always a joy, and thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.